It's time now for perspective. The war in Syria has already had a massive impact on the country's infrastructure, its economy and its landscape, but it's also had a huge effect on youngsters. In its latest report, Save the Children has outlined the plight of over 2,500 foreign children who are still living in cramped refugee camps. Today's guest is Sonia Khush, the Syria Response Director for the charity. She joins us now live from the Jordanian capital. Thank you very much for being with us here on France 24. Now, it's been a very long and harsh winter for refugees in Syria. Can you first of all paint our viewers a picture of just how bad living conditions are for refugees in these camps?
Sure, it has been a very cold and rainy winter in Syria. Temperatures dip down to below freezing every night. You know, refugees have been living in these camps in northeast Syria for a couple of years now, stretching back to when the offensive on Mosul first started. So we're talking about families and children that have been living in tents for up to 2 years now. There are a lot of new arrivals coming from the recent offensive on Hajin. So we have families arriving in the middle of the night, having traveled 300 kilometers in freezing conditions. Up to 60 children have died during the journey and upon arrival because of the cold and the lack of food and adequate shelter. So it's really a tragic situation for them.
As your report outlines, children, of course, continue to be massively affected by those appalling conditions and, of course, by the ongoing conflict. Save the Children has tallied over 2,500 foreign youngsters. My next question is, where do they come from and what's being done to look after their welfare?
Well, the foreign children that the report refers to are children that were living under ISIS control. So their parents either went to Syria to join ISIS or were living in Raqqa or areas around Deir ez-Zor and ended up in that situation. So these children, especially the women and children, started arriving in camps when the offensive on Raqqa started. So some of them have been living in these camps for more than a year now. And as I mentioned, there are new arrivals still every day, up to several hundred we expect still to come in. So we're talking about a population that has been on the move, has been living under ISIS control. The children have really witnessed a lot of violence since the time they were living under ISIS. And it's a real challenge for aid agencies on the ground to provide them the support that they need to recover from what has been a really horrific experience for them.
Now, debate has been raging on the international stage this week about what to do with those youngsters who fled their homelands to join the Islamic State group when they were children or teenagers, and that they now want to come back. Donald Trump has now called on European countries to take back these youngsters and put them on trial. What is Save the Children's own view about Donald Trump's statement about the fact that European countries should take these ex-jihadists back and put them on trial?
Well, we think all countries should take their children and women back and you get them the support they need to recover. In the case of women, sure, there's a good chance that they should be put on trial or at least looked at what their motivation was for going to Syria, and that if it does require prosecution, at least there are internationally recognized courts to deal with that situation. When it comes to the children, we're actually talking about the majority of children being under the age of 7. So these children are victims. They did not choose to go to northeast Syria. They were taken by their parents. A lot of children have been born in Syria, which means right now they're stateless because they don't have passports of the country where their parents came from. So it's a really complicated situation. We do stress, though, that we would like all countries to take the families back, put them through the appropriate legal proceedings, but especially get children the psychological help they need to recover from years of living under violence and terror.
But what do you say to the likes of the British Interior Minister, for example, who this week has said, you know, I'm stripping this particular jihadist teenager from East London of her citizenship? Do you, as a charity, appreciate the perceived security concerns of repatriating such jihadists?
I have full faith in the British criminal justice system. In the first place, I believe young teenage girls who went to Syria in the first place were most likely recruited or groomed or fell under the influence of jihadis to go there in the first place. When you're 15 years old, you may not be making the most rational decisions. However, I would recommend that they bring Shamima Begum back, and if she needs to go through the British courts, they're well set up. They've existed for hundreds of years, and I have full confidence that the courts would be able to act appropriately. Leaving her in a camp in northeast Syria where it's overcrowded, where she has a newborn that's only days old, surely that's not in the best interest of that child, which is really our primary concern.
Now, when and if the Islamic State group's caliphate is fully collapsed, analysts believe, of course, that the jihadist threat will still linger in Syria. And, of course, the conflict between Assad's forces and those who oppose the Damascus regime, that fight is still going on. What are your fears for the welfare of children in the coming weeks and months?
Our fear is that ISIS cannot be eradicated by dropping bombs or by killing fighters. It's an ideology that continues to be alive there, and it continues to affect children. The children that my teams see on the ground still have nightmares. They still talk about military exercises that they were being trained to do to eventually become ISIS fighters. It's really not a healthy situation for children to be exposed to that ideology. So giving them the support they need, helping older children find jobs that don't include joining an armed group, getting more representative governance in place inside places like Syria can really combat the spread of the ideology, which is what's going to eradicate ISIS in the end.
And Sonia Khush, just one more question. What is your message to those that can help and really bring about change?
My message, especially for those in the countries of origin where these families came from, is advocate for your government to bring them home. We have full faith in your criminal justice system, but there are so many children that need health care, that need to get into school, that need psychological support, and they cannot get what they need in northeast Syria right now. They need to be brought home.
Okay, Sonia Khush from Save the Children in the Jordanian capital. Thank you very much for being with us for today's Perspective segment. You're watching live from Paris. These are the top stories we're covering for you at this hour. The international coalition is racing to clarify if the man known as the French voice of the Islamic State group has in fact been killed in an airstrike in Syria. Officials here in Paris have, though, yet to comment on those rumours that Fabien Klein is dead. And the High Court in Kenya pushes back its ruling on decriminalising homosexuality. That panel of 3 judges now says it will deliver its verdict on the overturning of the current colonial-era legislation on May the 24th.